So, today we're going to be discussing the Parmenides. The speakers are Parmenides, Zeno, Socrates, and a man called Aristotle, who is not the Aristotle, but another one. Skipping through the framing narrative which serves to set the scene, the actual dialogue opens with Socrates summarizing an argument against the plurality of being that he has just heard from Zeno. This argument goes, if the things that are many, then they are both like and unlike. Nothing can be both like and unlike, therefore the things that are not many. Socrates rejects the second premise of this argument, suggesting that things can in fact be both like and unlike. This is an argument we should recognise from the Phaedo, where sensible things participate in forms in a relational way. As Simmias is taller than Socrates but shorter than Phaedo, so is in one way great and in another way small. Socrates suggests that forms do follow Zeno's argument, in that each form is only one and cannot have contrary properties. Parmenides then points out 6 arguments showing Socrates' current understanding of the forms is flawed. He first asks if there are forms even of things like hair and mud, which Socrates rejects, which defeats the point if all mud can be mud without sharing in a form. The second argument asks whether forms are divided between their instances, and if not, how they can be multiply present. Both of these seem to lead to absurdities if forms are separate and pure like Zeno's many. The next is what has come to be called the third man argument after Aristotle. Must there not be a common form to bind the form of X to the instances of X? This creates an infinite chain and renders the theory worthless. Socrates at this point interjects with the suggestion that forms are thoughts which exist in the mind. Parmenides shows that this doesn't help since thoughts are of things, meaning each form would be a thought of yet another form, resulting in another infinite regression. So, in response, Socrates suggests that forms are patterns which natural things resemble. Parmenides argues that if natural things are like forms, then forms are also like natural things. If this is so, then forms participate in likeness, and an infinite regression like that of the third man argument is again formed. The final problem involves relations. Mastery and slavery are related to one another, each is what it is only because of its relation to the other. Similarly, a master is only a master in relation to a slave, not in relation to slavery itself, and vice versa. If the same thing is applied to knowledge, then knowledge of forms and knowledge of instances in nature are mutually exclusive. From this, it seems that the principles not only of the theory of forms, but of the relation between the one and the many are unintelligible. If this is the case, then dialectic seems to be impossible. So Parmenides rejects Socrates' initial premise that forms cannot have contrary properties at all, and proposes a set of 9 hypotheses that can be used to investigate a given form by their implications. Parmenides chooses to demonstrate this using the one, which we know to be identical to the form of the good spoken of in the Republic. That being the case, this one is not like the forms discussed earlier, but is that by which they are, recalling the analogies of the sun and the cave in the Republic. By focusing on the one, Parmenides provides not only a model for investigating the forms, but elaborates on the more fundamental problem of the relation between the one and the many. In the first hypothesis, it is given that if the one is, it will not be many. Most translations here imply that being is being said of the one, but toon is not in the Greek. It's more like if one, not many. The one has no parts, nor a beginning nor end, and it is not a whole. Logically, it can't have a cause, nor even be a cause in the conventional sense, but in its own way as the prerequisite principle of things which allows for their being. This conclusion strongly resembles the apophatic presentation of the first principle found in Buddhism, Taoism, and in Meister Eckhart. The second hypothesis, Proclus argues, and Marsilio Ficino agrees, that this hypothesis demonstrates the one's relation to being, and each conclusion therefore reveals one of the unfolding orders of unity, that is to say, the gods. Being and the one are shown to be distinct, and thereby the one that has being here in the second hypothesis is ontologically dependent on the one of the previous hypothesis. However, being is not separable from the one, as wherever there is being, there is the one. Therefore, there is a multitude or manifold of the one as participated by being. These are the henads. The third hypothesis establishes that if one is, or if one, then the many have contrary properties. They are not one, yet each is one. They are both limited and unlimited, identifying them with the mixed nature from the Philebus, and so all beings possess contrary properties, including the forms, which solves some of the earlier issues with forms. The fourth and fifth hypotheses treat the many in relation to the one, or the one which is beneath being, as Marsilio Ficino puts it. Matter and sensible things are under discussion in these parts, and we see material quantity is caused by the one but not being. Those familiar with Proclus will recognise this. Beneath material quantity lies a totally indefinite multitude. In the next four hypotheses, Parmenides examines the denial of the one, specifically the one that has being, the second hypothesis one, not the first. The result of each hypothesis is an apparent absurdity. The one both exists and does not exist, cognition is impossible, and the many do not exist either. At the end of the dialogue, all but one of the arguments against the forms from earlier have been resolved, with the question of how we can know the forms and how the gods can know of nature left for future consideration.